Hello everyone, it's Chris here. Welcome to the book show. Thoroughly enjoying speaking to you about the books. I hope you enjoy being here. Man, I'm a bit sweaty. It's cold here in the studio on the third floor. Got very good air conditioning. But I had to run out quickly to see why the cats are meowing somewhere. The cats to me is like children. But what is quite interesting, well, more interesting than me anyway, is the book. The book I want to speak to you about, which is actually book 7 in the series, Codename Angel. Now, Codename Angel is the book where Angelique Dawson, the main character, actually comes to life. That's where she actually starts playing a major role in the books, like she does in all the books except the first few ones, because by the nature of the books, she's a little bit held on the background. So these books follow from Codename Foxtrot, about which I spoke before. And it's not a very long book. It's about 362 pages, but thoroughly enjoyable. I really enjoyed writing it. It's basically about the South African nuclear program. For you overseas who perhaps didn't know it, but South Africa had nuclear weapons in the 1970s already. A lot of fingers were pointed at Israel for assisting South Africa to build these weapons. And of course, Israel itself has nuclear weapons. There's no doubt about it. They refuse to admit or deny, but we all know it's true. And we also know that during the Yom Kippur War, one of my heroes, actually, which is Golda Meir and Moshe Dayan, the one-eyed Israeli general, he sent her a message and she sent a message back. And basically what they were saying in that message, in a code form, but in a clear message, it was a message for the US and for the Soviet Union and for the Arabs, where that stage were actually winning the war hands down, that they are preparing the nuclear weapons. In other words, it's doctrine in Israel anyway, that should they be overrun or should they lose the war that badly, they will just go out with a huge nuclear bang, and they will nuke everything around them. Of course, it's very fascinating, that scenario, because there are certain predictions made by the occultists, the Satan worshippers. I write about them in many of my books, especially Oath of Evil, the Warn Protestantism. Yes, I know, I mention this book in every lecture I give. The reason why I do it, and I explain that everywhere as well, is that if you cannot look at life from a biblical viewpoint, by which I mean the King James and absolutely nothing else, if you speak English or read English, in Afrikaans perhaps the 1953 or 53 translations, but nothing after that, simply because the Bibles were changed. But if you cannot look at it from a biblical viewpoint of prophecies playing out, you probably will never understand what's going on in the world. Which is why that book is important, because it does explain the prophecies and what happens from an intelligence viewpoint. Very fascinating story. We know that Golda Meir and Moshe Dayan sent that out in clear so that the war could end. And it was a desperate plea, actually, for assistance from the US, because they were losing the Air Force like you can't believe, because the Egyptians surrounded their armor, which were moving into the desert, with Ak. And what they were also doing is they were using the Saget, which would take out the Israeli tanks from quite a distance in guided missiles. And Israelis had no defense on it, absolutely no defense. Their prior tactics just didn't work. They were figured out. And of course, when they came with the Air Force, which is their main weapon, they tried to bomb these tanks and stop the armor attacks. They ran into ambushes. And later they came up with the idea of just spinning the tracks of the tanks to make everything dusty. And that is how they said they defeated the Saget. Did they? Well, no, not really. But funny enough, NATO then followed suit. They would spin the tracks of their tanks in snow to try and create a whiteout so that they can't be seen and then not be shot out. Would that have worked? Well, no, probably not. And of course, there's not always snow in Europe. Sometimes damn warm in that place. But it's interesting, these things, because they all fit together. Because in the occultic world, which is Satan worship, nothing else, there was predictions made. And one of the predictions which was made in a book, and I'll put the details for you here, is that there will be 3 world wars. One of them will be to break the British Empire, and that will be between Germany, Imperial Germany, and the British Empire. It was the First World War. And yes, that's where the decline of the British Empire started, which of course was rounded off by 1945. The British Empire was basically gone. And then they said, this fellow said, there's going to be, and this is all in his book, Dogma and Principles, or something they call it. I'll put the correct name for you. Very hard book to find. What you find on the internet and in the open is modified books. But if you're inside those circles, you will actually find the original one. And it's scary how much of a planning and suggestions and ideas he had in this book, which actually came out. Because he also predicted the Second World War. And that was firstly to break Germany again. Why? Because it's a country where the Reformation started in a big way with Martin Luther. Of course, there were Jan Hus before. And the idea of that was to create a world empire in the US. In other words, to make the US move away from its Monroe doctrine, which says they're not really interested in what's happening in the rest of the world. They worry about the Americas, meaning South America as well. You know, that place where the CIA is known as Catholics in Action. Yeah, no, that's true. Read my books. And they then did that with Bretton Woods. America then became a major dominant country in the West anyway. Soviet Union was keeping it a little bit back, but it also says, of course, that the second beast of the Bible will be meddling everywhere and the whole world will follow it. It's also so that when one of the presidents, George H. Bush is one of them, actually mentioned a new world order, so that the Antichrist in Rome, the papacy, the popes, I also mentioned this. Very, very fascinating how these things come together. And we know that the CIA from the 1950s to the 1990s, they started coming out that they destabilized and tried to do color revolutions in more than 60 countries. That's 1/3 of the world. Of course, today it's much worse. But that also was predicted in the Bible. They said the whole world will follow the second beast, will implement the first beast, who gets its power. The first beast now gets its power from Satan, from the dragon. These are biblical stuff, and that's why I say to you, it's very important that you can understand the bigger picture and then see how life plays out and how it's moving towards that direction, as it bloody well will. If the Bible made such a prediction, then man, it's going to work out like that. Whether you like it or believe it or don't want to know, doesn't matter. It's still going to happen, you know. Like I always say to an atheist, you know, if you can insult me, you can tell me I'm part of a cult because I'm a Seventh-day Adventist and I'm a proud one. Even though we're the biggest Protestant church in the world, 22 million of us. Much better than these 57,000 other denominations or denominations, what do you call them, different churches. Seems to me that every second guy creates a church somewhere and he's got his own ideas. And and then you got 50 or 100 people there. That's about the average size of a church is 50 to 150 people. So when you start talking numbers, man, with 22 million, you can't compete. Even here in Thailand and other places in the world, you'll find the same as the Catholic system. You'll actually find 7-day hospitals. And if you ever have to choose going to a Seventh-day Hospital or a Catholic hospital, I would sincerely advise you go to a 7-day one. Better. That's anyway the advice which we give to people traveling to Africa. So it is the largest Protestant thing, and yes, they have strict ideas according to the Bible alone. But the fact of the matter is, this fellow then also in his book, Morals and Dogma, that's what it's called, also predicted a Third World War, which still has to happen. And this Third World War, according to this senior occultist and very, very senior Freemason, and Freemasonry is just a front of the Catholic Jesuit order to control the Protestants and Jews and Indians and who else. They say they're not religious, but if you look at the way these temples of theirs are built and the way where they face always to a certain way, the satanic symbols and things inside them, as bad as in a Catholic church or cathedral, you would be surprised. And then if you look with all Freemasons, you'll find out it's mostly the higher ranking ones is not common people. They are the leaders of the world. And that's why you see them making these stupid little signs. This is a Freemason sign. Yeah, I cannot afford proper glasses, even though I'm in Congress and I'm making millions. So I have to put it like this and look at you like this. Yeah, that's a sign, man. Other sign is this finger like this. Then there's one like this. There's all sorts of signs. But now I'm not scratching my nose. That's not a sign. And then the way they shake hands, it's something like this. And you just need to look at these flippin' Third Brigade of us, and also the Mercians. The Mercians, remember the Bible says the Mercians will cry when the system of theirs come to an end. There will be a gnashing of teeth, and they will be very upset because they're going to lose money, a lot of money. They're going to lose everything. So if you look at them and you look at the other front organizations like the Knights of Malta, one of them, and you find every single world leader, from Nelson Mandela to whatever US president to whatever UK, French, man, you call them up, and every businessman, all of them standing there with the Knights of Malta, man. Yeah, man, it's a fascinating world, because once again it goes back to this book. I'm not just telling you these things. I have reasons why I say this to you, and we do go into this in great detail in a lot of the books. But anyway, this fellow then says straightforward that there's going to be a Third World War, and it will start in the Middle East. Now, there's only one country in the world who's going to start a Third World War, and I'm sad to say that's the Jewish state. There's no one else here who's going to do it. And with that, I'm not saying that the Jewish state Israel is not has no right to exist. I'm really not saying that. If you know anything about me or read any of my books, including this one, Codename Angel, you will see that I'm actually very sympathetic to the Jewish cause, because my grandmother was Jewish, man, and just listen to the name of my wife, Rebecca. It should say something to you, shouldn't it? And I'm also the one, of course, who wrote the When and Where books, where we talk about the Jewish army, which got nothing to do with the Israeli army, rescuing Jews out of occupied Europe. And that happened. It's history. So yeah, so in this book of Angel, there is actually the first operation where there's a combined operation between Mossad and the South Africans. And I say the word South Africans very loosely, because even if Angelique Dawson in the books anyway are the head of counterterrorism and later counter-espionage, the South African Secret Service in real life, she was actually something else. And it's come out in the later books, even though they were written first. VFO 565, which by the way was the code by which the sleeper agents were recalled after the 1998 bombing of the US embassies in Sub-Saharan Africa, Kenya, and some other place, I think Somalia, I'm not too sure. But two of the embassies exploded, hundreds of people died. That was the real beginning of Muslim extremism, jihadism in Sub-Saharan Africa. You know the story further when we started picking up the mosques. we started seeing the first wave arrive, and Muslim truce. I talk about these things in all the books. So, Codename Wednesday 7 is actually the one where I speak about the rise of the mosques. And the book I still have to speak about as I sit here now, Codename Swan 53, is where I actually really go into the Muslim truce. But I don't want to go into that now again. I'm just telling you these things so it can fit into the bigger picture. Now, it is logical that if a country like Israel has a lot of nukes, I say between, it's difficult, there's no real figures, but between 150 to 300 nukes. And some of them would be tactical in the sense be able to fire from a cannon, like a 155 millimeter cannon. And there's also, of course, those who can fit on their missiles, the ballistic missiles. The only way they can get it actually to a place like Iran or Saudi, because the Air Force can also drop these things and also launch, of course, air launch missiles with nuclear heads. So you can imagine that countries around them are actually scared of Israel. They should be. Got a good military. I don't agree with what's happening right now. I think we are going way overboard. I think we're creating more terror than anything else. And I do believe they should be held by the high standards. We're not a bunch of terrorists after all. And you cannot really justify attacking hospitals and schools and churches and mosques. You just can't justify it to me. But again, that does not make me anti. If you listen to legacy conversations, you will actually find out I speak to a lot of Israeli soldiers there, and they treated with great respect. And so there's a soft spot in South Africa amongst the white people anyway, with from my age and higher towards Israel. A younger generation of all populations. No, I don't think so. If you've not been in South Africa for a while and you go back to South Africa, there's a couple of things which you notice. The first thing is the utter failure. You notice that the roads are gone. Even though when I was there last time, there were quite a lot of building going on with the roads, renovating them, getting them back to where they used to be before 94, when Mandela took over. But in general, if you get off the highway and you're not in the Western Cape province, which is run by the opposition and therefore it actually works, it's amazing. There's just no roads. I remember taking the road from Port Elizabeth down to Butili because I wanted to sleep over at my former commander, who was also on legacy, Colonel Potgieter, and his wife, Narwa, who's a wonderful person, both of them wonderful people. And so I took the back roads, and you know what? The roads has disappeared. It was really like the roads went. I mean, it's just amazing. So yeah, so that's the way it is, man. There's nothing you can do. But there was a time when things were very different, and South Africa really had a very good weapon systems and things like that going on. They still have weapons, but whether they can still manufacture them is a different story. But so the story came out anyway that South African nuclear deterrent was actually built on Israeli technology. My research and what I spoke to people and what comes out in this book is that it's nonsense, it's not true. Because the Israelis actually stole their technology from the US. That's where they got it from. Now, there is a rumor that they got a lot of assistance from the French as well. But I think these days it's accepted in the intelligence community that they basically stole the technology from the US. They were sort of assisted by the Zionist and especially these evangelist Christian type of people. But even that is changing. In the last 2 years, we've seen that Israel, it's really worrisome. It's not that popular anymore. That's what I was saying with people of my generation. And that's the other shocking thing about South Africa is if you go down Johannesburg and everywhere where you find Muslim people, and they're good people, I no problem with Muslim people in general, then you find a lot of new mosques. And if you look at the mosque, you will see it's a Saudi influence. Saudis paid for that. the way they are constructed. Of course, the local Muslims always say no, it's not like that, they did it themselves, blah, blah, blah. But I think even a cursory check on the books and where the money comes from, you'll find it will come from Saudi or one of a Sunni group of Muslims, which is interesting because those are also the second beast, America's great friends. But the Sunni Muslim faith is actually the one where the terrorist comes from. That's the one which is Al Qaeda and ISIS, not Shia, which is Iran. How fascinating is that? How fascinating is that? So the younger generation don't really like Israelis anymore. Even the same in the US and right across Europe, you're starting to see there's now a real dislike of Israel going on, especially because of the pictures which comes out from Palestine. Now, I grew up, of course, considering the PLO as a terrorist organization with every reason in the world. But the modern generations don't see it like that. So if Israel then is there, and if Israel is the root cause of all trouble, and this is the theory, I'm not saying it is, don't put words in my mouth, I'm telling you the theory. Then it's also so that Israel then at some stage will or might be forced into using the nuclear weapons, which means that the way to deter them is to have your own nuclear weapons. Now, South Africa gave up its nuclear weapons in 1993, I believe. They were handed over to the US. This is under Billy Goat Clinton, who's a man you cannot trust with your wife or girlfriend ever in a room alone. He still has not explained to us his 26 trips to Epstein Island. Sometimes, apparently, I'm told, without his security people. Now, that is highly, highly unlikely to happen with any other president. They're always surrounded by these people. But, yeah, you have to wonder why. Of course, we'll never know. Despite all these promises that it will come out. Yeah, just bullshit. Will never come out. Not before 100 years from now, you'll find out or whatever. But anyway, I actually met the man. Well, I saw him at a distance at a few functions, and I was still an attorney. And he was an impressive man, tall man. Even his wife, Hilarious, was quite an attractive woman at that stage. I mean, I don't particularly like her, and I don't like blondes at all, but she was there. She was not as bad as she became later. My impression as an ex-policeman was that she's actually an abused wife, in the sense that she looked lost. I actually felt sorry for her, actually prayed for her. A few times I saw her at a distance when they came to visit South Africa, which is always a major F-up. But anyway, it stands to reason then that a place like Iran or other countries in the Gulf region would want their own nuclear weapons to counter this threat from Israel. And it is a threat, because Israel will not hesitate in using those weapons. We know that. And we also know that they have the means and the capability and the capacity to do so. And they also have this doctrine of using them as a last resort. But I don't think they ever said they will not use them first, because they deny that they have. And they have to do that, and so does the US turds, the US politicians. Because by law, if it's proven that Israel actually have nuclear weapons, and they haven't declared them, and they're not part of a club, so to speak, the US is not by law allowed to even do business with them. And then goes for $4 billion a year, which they just give them every year for their military budget. And of course, a lot of other assistance as well. It's really amazing. I mean, Israel per capita before the last few years, where the economy now is in a very bad shape, they had a per capita higher income than France, the first world country. And you have to admire them. Taking a desert like that and building it up to that standard is really, really something else. But sadly, like in all communities, you have ultra people who go way too far with what their ideas are. You know, it's General Eisenhower later when he was president, when he said that if you don't walk in the middle of a road, you walk in the gutter. Yeah, That's true. If you're too far left or too far right, you're in the gutter. That is what Nixon has called the silent majority. Clear-thinking people can say to you, listen, bombing a mosque or a hospital is not the right thing to do. You know what I mean? While the far right or the ultra will say to you, orthodox or whatever, will say to you, no, of course, well, what's the problem? Yeah, these people hide behind civilians, so we kill the civilians as well. Yeah. But it's a good thing we kill the civilians because then they can't grow up, the children, and come and kill us in 20 years from now. Yeah. So when you're talking extermination, you're talking the same as what happened to you in the Holocaust. It's not right. No clear thinking man is going to agree with your end of story. It's just not the way to do things. Doesn't matter. You have no excuse. There is no excuse. So anyway, it stands to reason that a place like Iran, of course, would want nuclear weapons. Now, it's a bit hazy here because Iran says they don't want nuclear weapons because of a religious aspect, and they also say they don't need nuclear weapons because they have their missiles. And yes, they have a lot of missiles. If you're one of those who believe that the Israeli airstrike on Iran in October of last year, 2024, was actually a great success and they took out all the air defense systems, you're certainly mistaken. You've got no clue what you're talking about. In fact, the Israelis had to stop the attack and retreat and basically fly away in post-haste because they suddenly realized their F-35s, which I've been warning you is not stealthy at all. I told you many times in my books. They got picked up and painted by radar, and it was just a matter of time before we all shut down. Yes, they did some limited damage, almost nothing. If you then say to me, if you're one of those who believe that the second Iranian strike against Israel was a total failure, when you live in a dream world as well, it wasn't a failure. The missiles got through. A lot of them didn't. Yes, that's true. A lot of them didn't, but that's a way of missile warfare. You will always send a whole bunch which will try to get the air defenses up. You record the way the air defenses work, by the way, that's how you do it. And then they engage these missiles, and in between and after them come the real ones. We've seen this in Ukraine and Russia, and again, if you're one of those who believe that Russia just suddenly decided to attack Ukraine, what's the word this idiot or the lion always use? Full scale attack. Yeah, you're an idiot. No, that happened because NATO expanded eastwards against the warnings. All the warnings were given to them. They even said they won't do it. Yes, they did it. And if you think that Ukraine is winning this war, oh man, really, we stand on opposite sides. We definitely don't agree with these things. So in the book, having seen this complete scenario about the Third World War being predicted, Israel having these nuclear weapons and threatening to use them as well, getting away with it basically because they deny it or they don't say anything. They don't. It's just typical double speak. We don't deny it, but we don't say we have either. So where do we stand now? Open your damn country so that inspectors can go and look at you. But no, they won't do that. They're also not part of a non-affiliation, or what do you call that treaty? The one who said you will not be part of nuclear weapons. But if you look at North Korea, since they got nuclear weapons, the chances of them being invaded is zero. Neither South Korea nor the US nor any of the little chihuahuas there around them is going to try them. So my advice to people like Iran would be get a damn nuclear weapon and get a lot of it. Simply because that's the only way to protect yourself in these days. But I also have to say to you, from a biblical viewpoint, I don't believe the world will come to an end with a nuclear war. Simply because it's not biblical. That's not how the world will end. The Bible will tell you that Jesus will return for the second coming, and there'll be a whole bunch of things happening then, and those who is in him will be taken up. Even those who is dead, they will get a new body. So will those still alive, hopefully us who's listening here. and will go up into heaven where will stay 1,000 years, and those who remains behind is dead. No such thing as the chosen. No such thing as crap. Because it's not biblical. No such thing. You're not in that group who's going up to heaven. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. You're going to die. The earth will be left desolate. That's what the Bible says. So you have to make your choices right now. By the way, in Oath of Evil, I do describe the second coming as a biblical view, exactly how it will play off, so that you're not deceived. Because, you will find a lot of people, even Satan himself, masquerading as an angel of light, or even as Jesus. And they will do miracles, and you will be not knowing what the Bible said, and so you will believe these idiots. Yeah, you will believe a guy. There's many of them who's actually one in Australia, I think a few years ago, who declared himself Jesus. Even though the Bible says when Jesus comes again, he will not touch the earth. Yeah, he'll be hanging in the air, says that. So why is this fake Jesus? Why are you walking around on the earth? Yeah, I wonder. Where's the scars on your body, mate? Tell me. Because Jesus in his body still have scars when he appeared after the crucifixion. And by the way, there's only one country in the world who still has crucifixion on their legal books and still does it. Yeah, but North Korea. No, not at all. Iran. No. Saudi Arabia. Yeah, Saudi. That country, that friend of yours. Donald Trump always said, you should know a country by its friends. Yeah, Donald. I look at the second piece. I look at your friends. I know you. I know you. Yeah. So don't be deceived. Don't be deceived by this crap. Anyway, the South African nuclear weapons, as far as I could see, it had nothing to do with Israeli ones. It's South African technology which set them off. Now, there's two ways of setting off a nuclear reaction, which is actually a nuclear explosion. I also describe at Pelindaba, there's a certain building, I think it was called Building 5000 or something, and it's about a kilometer or 3 away from what they call the circular building. Yeah, I describe all those things in the books, but the story actually for me personally happens before this. I was practicing law in Pretoria. I was already involved in the shadows by that time, but and Johannesburg, actually more in Johannesburg than Pretoria. And so what happens is a couple of things reached me. The first information I got was that 3 or 4 members of a police special task force. Now that's like police special forces, very well trained, a lot more than just a SWAT team. They're very, very good. Still to this day, they're very good. And they, suddenly 4 of them, that is the rumors, which reached me, died of thyroid cancer. Okay, that's very weird, because for fit guys like that, even in their older age, they don't really get overweight or anything, they just keep on being fit. That was strange. It was not the type of illness you would expect from a unit like that. And then I heard of a Muslim medical doctor who was practicing medicine in Laudium. Now, Laudium is like a township for Muslim people created by the old apartheid government for them to live. And it's right next to Pretoria. There's also further to Johannesburg side, there's one called Lenasia, or they call it Lens. But that's not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about the one right next to Pretoria. And suddenly this doctor said that he also is getting a lot of patients who has thyroid cancer. Yeah. And he said to me that there's also a lot of babies are now being born deformed. Now, okay, a lot of people will say it's because of inbreeding or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm really not saying that. The Muslims I know and the ones I worked with were very educated people, doctors, lawyers, clever people, smart people, great people. They would invite you to their house and you would be like an honored guest, man. Hey, they had fantastic food as well. In those days, I still ate meat. And I had thoroughly great times with them. I think of it in a lot of fondness back to them. And of course, my first late wife was a Muslim woman. I don't really Even though I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, I'm a fundamentalist. In a sense, I believe in the Bible and the Bible alone. I'm not here to convince you of any religion. I don't care. Find your own way. Pray about it and find your own way. I know what I found. And I know what they felt and whatever. It's one of those things you just let go. I can't convince you to change, and I can't and I don't care. It's that simple. The problem here, though, is that thyroid cancer is linked to nuclear waste. In other words, if you're contaminated with nuclear exposure afterwards, radiation, your chances of getting thyroid cancer is actually quite good. So, bingo, alarms were going off. I then started investigating it. I ran into two walls. The first wall was the South African Police Special Task Force members as one talk. I had a few of them on the Legacy channel, which is the main channel, and they spoke very well, but they just rolled their eyes when I asked them about the deaths of a thyroid cancer. They played dumb. Said to me it never happened. So I don't know. People who told me about it was up to then very good informants. They never lied about anything, would they? And then the second thing which happened was, in a blank wall which I ran into, was suddenly I had to visit. My handler arrived, who's a woman I really admire and respect, and dangerous woman as well. In fact, Angelique Dawson in the books are based upon her and some other people I know. And she arrived for a cup of tea, which is like a really intensive talk. And you would sit in a coffee shop somewhere, just the man and the woman together, faces close together. There'd be a few lads around her, just observing. Definitely the Secret Service also use deaf people. They can lip read, so that's why you also see a person sitting there at coffee shop and they're talking a bit like this, finger, secret agent. That's how they do it. So you can't read their lips, but you don't need to read their lips. If you can read body language, you can quickly figure out what's going on. But anyway, so you would sit there, and that's why I came up with the term of an issued girlfriend. You would sit together, it would look perhaps to the world that you're a couple talking to each other. You do talk to each other, but you're really not a couple unless you're a couple, you know what I mean? Which is one of the problems which Angelique Dawson here in the books have with a guy actually writing the books, which is her later husband, but at this stage the chief agent, a guy called Jeffrey Foxtrot. Now, the books are written from his viewpoint, where he's writing the story now, looking back for many years later, he's looking back on their life in the shadows. And of course, the books are very romantic because these two are actually very much meant to be. But since she's the senior spy master, she's actually more than a handler, which is a very low-ranking officer, to be honest. And he's part of a team, for a senior officer, especially female, to be in a relationship with one of the male agents is really not a done thing. Not in the military, not in the spy world, nowhere. So in this book, they are very, you can see there's something forming up with him, because in the previous book, named Foxtrot, they both lost Foxtrot lost his wife. She was killed in the book anyway in Iraq in a bomb explosion. In fact, that character is based upon my late wife, my first late wife, who was not killed in a bomb explosion. She was murdered in a different way. But let's not talk about that. It doesn't matter. I have a fairly good idea which Middle Eastern country did that. But, as they say, in that world shit happens. They weren't going after her so much. They were going after the informant. But it almost started the war between the French intelligence service and Mossad. It really came close. But anyway, whatever. I think the DJSE would have definitely won that war. Why? Because the French spies are actually different, very different from what you see in the rest of the world. Most of them are commando trained. They are actually encouraged to go through the commando courses, and they do. And if you want to say to me, roll your eyes and say, oh, the French army, then you don't know what you're talking about. Really. I will mention the units for you of the French Marine Commando units like Commando U-Boat, and there's 4 or 5 others of them. They had every single, they're as good as the Navy SEALs, and they are as good as the Royal Marines as well as the SBS. So if you don't know something, please don't comment. I'm tired of that too. I'm tired of the white flags. Not going to ask the Brits again how come that they have no losses during World War II. I'm not going to go into that argument again. I mean, I was mentioned it in so many books. Codename Caribbean, go and read it. Yeah, well, anyway, it doesn't matter whether it's immaterial. It doesn't matter. The chances of you actually meeting up with them is so remote that it doesn't matter how well trained the French spies are or not. It doesn't matter. Look, there's different worlds. It's a world in you live in, the normal world, I would hope. Then there's the criminal world, there's the espionage world, and those two actually mix quite a bit, because a lot of the times criminals are actually used to do certain things, but not always, because you can't really trust a criminal, You can't really. But anyway, as I say, it's very difficult for Angelique and Foxtrot to actually have this relationship and hide it. So in this book, they actually start looking at each other. Because, like I said in the first book, in Codename Foxtrot, they both lost Foxtrot lost his wife, Marwa, and that happened. And then also Angelique lost her husband also to cancer. And if you read a very much later book, Codename Deborah, which is actually the last book in the series, even though it's book 12 as written, in Deborah, it actually comes out why this guy got cancer in the first place. But that doesn't matter. The point I'm making here is that it's hard for a couple like that to actually show much emotion to each other. So as the series goes on, they become very close to each other in such a way that the people around them know it. It's an open secret that these two are not issued girlfriend or issued fiancés or issued husband and wife anymore. They are that, even though, of course, they only get married officially in the Codename VF 0565 after Angelique is detained illegally in South Africa as a French penetration agent, and she's been rescued by Foxtrot in that book. A lot of other things happen in the book as well. Then they escape and they get married on a. Yeah, I'm not gonna tell you where and what, but fascinatingly enough, is that there is that relationship in the background. So anyway, so those are the things which started me thinking on what was actually happening before I started hearing about this Codename Angel, which is based upon a training scenario. But there's a lot of people who actually say it sort of happened in a different way, but it sort of happened. Anyway, this handler said to me I should rather stop asking stupid questions. And then when she walked out, she smiled at me and says, and this is many years before I wrote the book, she says, one day you can write a fictional story about this. Yeah, I did. It's called Codename Angel. So anyway, there's another thing which came out, and if you research a bit, you will see that in the 1990s, after the nuclear weapon program came to an end, a lot of these nuclear scientists, of course, were now basically retrenched or without work. And suddenly, I think in 1998 or perhaps the early 2000s, a letter appeared in the newspaper saying that these former nuclear scientists are looking for jobs, and unless they find a job which is suitable to their skills and their standing in the community, I think they mean money, they might have to start taking their skills somewhere else. And I read that and I thought to myself, guys, you don't understand. If there's any incline of you going to a place like Iran to build nuclear weapons against Israel, I have two words for you. It's called Gerald Bull. And if you don't know what Gerald Bull we actually speak in Legacy Conversations. I don't know if a video will be out by the time you see here, because this video is made on the 1st of June. You will probably only see it end of October, because that's how far ahead we are. But I have to get the job done. I've got other things to do here as well, and I want to carry on with my life. I need to go to Katchaburi. It's a city very not too far from Bangkok. That's where the bridge over the River Kwai. I want to go and record there for Legacy, things like that. But these videos are quite far ahead, but we did make another video. I hope it's out by this time. Is with Colonel Perry Franken of 3-2 Battalion Support Group, as well as Major General Koos Bom Lapsher. And between these two, they know everything about the G5 cannon, the G6, and of course the missile systems, the South African versions of the Stalin organ, Stalin Oral, the MLRS, which we these days Battalier, Valkyrie, I've had all sorts of names, but South Africa is actually very good at these things. And in the second episode, I asked him specifically about Gerald Bull. Now, Dr. Gerald Bull was a Canadian, and then he did help South Africa with the design of a G5. Was it a Canadian design? No, not at all. It's a South African design, but he came out with a certain formula. And then afterwards, he actually went to jail, I think, for helping South Africa. There were UN embargoes. And then he ended up working for Iraq, for Saddam Hussein. And he had this idea of firing shells into space. And then, of course, with space, it's hanging there and the earth is turning. And then it falls down right on Israel. And he had this massively long cannon. He believed in this extraordinary long barrels. And there's lots of reasons for that. And then he got executed by what I say straight is Mossad, because it got all the hallmarks, using the whole .22 close range, blah, 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 all those things in Paris. He got shot and killed there after numerous warnings. So the first idea which came to me when I heard about the South African scientists talking about that perhaps they need to be employed properly and things like that, or they take their skills, is you're looking for death. You're looking for death, because if there's any incline about you working to build a nuclear weapon against Israel, they're going to kill you. Yeah. It's a state with the most murders in sense of state-sponsored assassinations, which is murder, in the world. There's more than 3,000, as we know, as we sit here. Did it help them in any way? Did it work out for them? No, didn't. No, didn't. Will it help you to kill another 10,000, including me? No, won't help you. It's the wrong tactics, totally the wrong tactics. It's just fueling violence. There is only one alternative there, and that is to make peace. Start living with each other. Of course, when you talk to Israelis, and I do talk to them a lot, and it's in the books as well, I think of Codename Vet 101. We actually speak about that, and they always have the same answer. They say, well, Chris, we would be more than willing to leave them alone if they would just leave us alone, man. But they're not willing to leave us alone. They call us, colonists and apartheid regime and all sorts of insulting names. And they just hate us. They want to kill us. It's part of their DNA almost. Yeah, the hatred in the Middle East is very hard to understand from the outside. Again, you have to look at it from a bigger viewpoint, but I don't want to. It's not the time and the place for me to discuss that. I'm just mentioning it to you because in this book, the storyline would be that some South African nuclear scientists actually do make a couple of devices, nuclear devices. A few of them to be able to be shot with a G5 cannon, or like 155mm, and the others tactical. And then 2 or 3 of them was a little bit bigger, more in the Hiroshima class. Now, it's very fascinating to me, guys, when you listen to the Western intelligence analysts, and they're good. I mention a lot of these people actually in my books when I write. and with their permission, of course. But it's fascinating to me that they cannot make, in general, these people in the first place don't know South Africa had nuclear weapons. They don't do history, so in other words, they don't know. And secondly, they forgot the most crucial point of all. If South Africa had nuclear weapons, then South Africa actually knows how to make nuclear weapons. Yeah, that's logical, right? It's totally logical. It's so flippant logical that they can't get that point. So in other words, if South Africa do want a nuclear weapon and they don't, it will not be hard for South Africa to actually manufacture a nuclear weapon. They've done it before, but technology is there. And let me tell you, it's not great technology to begin with. It's really old technology. Your problem is to get that thing to have a nuclear reaction. And there's only two ways you can do it. I think I described them in the book, or I might not. I did in the original manuscript, and then Angelique asked me to remove it, and so I did, or I might have. I think I did. But they work in a different way how they explode, because there's two different ways you can set it off. And I don't want to go too much into that. But the South African one is unique. And that's the other problem which came out in these years. And I sort of touched it in Codename Crocodile. Because something strange started happening in the Middle East in the 2000s. It is now after the second beast, the US invaded Iraq for no reason. Well, I said it was weapons of mass destruction. We all know that's bullshit. We all know that the French intelligence, before they invaded, actually smuggled one of their sources out, asset, as the US will say, out of Iraq. He was a very senior general there, and he said to them, they don't have weapons of mass destruction. He testified there. They actually came to see him. How do I know this? My late wife was involved. And guess what? Yeah. No way. They still invaded. Why did they invade? Well, what did Wesley Clark say? General Clark. He said, we're going to invade 5 countries. Okay, why? Well, this he didn't say, but it's to safeguard Israel. No other reason. That's why. And it's logical. You can destroy Iraq. It's not a threat against Israel. You can destroy Syria and let Al-Qaeda take over. It's not a conventional threat anymore. Yes, there might be some terrorist attacks, but you're not going to see Syrian armored divisions coming towards Israel. See what I mean? And the next target, of course, was Iran. So the entire invasion there was bullshit. And then they made every single mistake in the book. Every single mistake. I mean, what the US knows about counterinsurgency and counterterrorism is scary. It's scary because they've got no clue what they're doing. They're pathetic. In fact, they're creating more terrorism than anything else. I'll actually put a slide in here for you, which I put in many books, where you can see what happened when Africa Command. Oh, shame. It's the US attempt of counterterrorism in sub-Saharan Africa. Oh, shame. About what they actually caused. The moment they got involved, they just skyrocketed. Why? Because they kill the wrong people. Why? Because they have no sense of intelligence. Why? Because they are just low-standard troops. They can't do counterterrorism. They're simply not good enough. And they just caused nonsense wherever they go. So Iraq was no different, and then started explosions coming. Then you started finding the word IED, and people started dying. The more they die, the more scared the US and the coalition got. So scared that they wouldn't even want to leave their bases. So scared that they would actually just drive around. They wouldn't get out of their vehicles and talk to the locals. They would do nothing like that. And of course, they were raping their own. Yeah, I wrote about that. Voices, War Crimes USA. Go and read that book. You'll be surprised how easy it was for me to find all the intelligence. And by the way, we had a lot of South Africans, of course, involved as mercenaries there, or let's call them contractors. Such a nice word, much better than mercenary, but that's what it comes down to. And these South Africans most of them were reporting to the Secret Service, which is like the CIA. And so we had very, very good files on what's actually the state of the coalition forces. And as I always say to you, we knew as a military man look at another military man. There's certain things you want to see in him, and if you don't see it, you make certain conclusions. And it's the same when you do with his weapons and equipment and his state of readiness, and especially in his rear area and his bases. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's where we realized that nothing to fear. Nothing to fear. You're simply not as good as you think you are. In fact, you're pathetic. And unless you up your standards and change your ways and become less arrogant and stop thinking you're exceptional because there's nothing exceptional about you. I mean, you can't even read, man. Half of your nation, half of the US adults can only read at the level of standard 6, of a standard 6 child, of a grade 8. It's not me saying it, that's your own research showing it. You're not even a democracy, man. There was a study which came out which says you're exactly the same as Saudi. You've got a couple of families controlling you. Yeah, yeah, then you all bow down there towards the Antichrist as well, you know. When you see people like Donald Trump in his knees in a Catholic church, why is that? If I see Joe Biden like that, I wouldn't say a word. Why not? Because he is a serious Catholic and totally on the Jesuit influence. So yeah, of course he'll do it. So is the US Supreme Court, by the way. There's only Catholic judges, not one Protestant, not one Jew, not one Muslim, nah, not one Hindi. No. You might even be tempted to think that's a Catholic country now, not Protestant anymore. It is, by the way. It is. It has changed. Became a second beast. But anyway, to make a long story short, in the book, it seems like these weapons were now manufactured, these devices, and now they're being smuggled out. And the people smuggling them was doing the dirty work. There's a Zimbabwean intelligence agency, the CIO, Central Intelligence Organization. They're actually quite good, and they're quite violent. And they ran, and they are still running probably. I know about 2 death squads running in South Africa, killing dissidents. Yeah, I write about it in many of my books. And you can take for granted that these people and Angelique's people are sworn enemies. If they meet each other in the field, there's going to be violence. There's no two ways about it. Now, yeah, every book needs a villain. Isn't it like that? I really like the Zimbabweans, actually. Fantastic people, but the way that things turned out under that baboon Mugabe is just horrifying. There's no country left anymore. And anyway, that's a scenario which plays off. Is it based on reality? I say yes again. I've heard stories that this actually happened. And so the idea now is to find these nukes, and the team was escorting them out because they're already out of South Africa. The idea is to take them through Zimbabwe, through Mozambique, and have a rendezvous with a trailer or something, with a merchant ship, spy ship, or certainly, and then see if the weapons then will be smuggled further. Where to? Iran? Well, the book suggested it's Iran, but in fact we don't know. In fact, we never knew. But I said Iran, but as I explained to you and in the book, Iran isn't really that interested in nukes. But if they want it, they just need to ask the South Africans. That's the link which the intelligence agents can't, analysts just don't make. But if Iran or any country in the world actually need nukes, they just ask the South African scientists and we'll make them for you at a price. Not to say we're going to, but I say it can be done. And that's something we simply don't know. But there were a lot of bombs exploding also in Iraq. And when what you people probably don't know is wherever an American is killed violently, like in a bomb explosion, all the details are entered in a database. And then from there on, you can see the patterns. Because when you make a bomb, you make it in a certain way. And because you make it in a certain way, it can be traced back to you. Also, many times the bomb makers actually don't wear gloves, or they think that the evidence will be destroyed. No, it won't be. There will always be evidence left behind, and it's tested for fingerprints, the DNA, all sorts of tests, what explosives were used, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, if you can actually defuse a bomb and you can get hold of a damn thing, then it's quite easy for you to make a lot of investigative deductions from it. So it is always good if you can get one. But they started exploding in Iraq. And this is actually true. It caused a lot of investigations from our side, where South African Special Forces techniques suddenly were used for these IEDs. And they started exploding and they started killing coalition members. And then, of course, the US and everybody started asking questions. And the question they were asking is it possible that South African Special Forces are involved in Iraq with these IEDs, or that they perhaps train these people somewhere, because it has all the hallmarks of South African Special Forces. Now, that never came out in the news, but it's out in the book. It's not a secret in my world anyway. And of course, the South Africans said no. And of course, the South African military really investigated all the Special Forces members as well. See if there's sudden wealth somewhere, you and your family. What religion are you? Do you really dislike the second beast? Are you sympathetic to the Muslim terror? Are you a Muslim yourself? All those things started to be investigated, came out negative as it ought to be. And by the way, many of these people, especially the spies, all of them are lie detector test every now and then. Same with military intelligence, people like that. I do describe it in the book as well. Perhaps not this one, but every one, and in a lot of it. And so anyway, they started using a certain way of the way explosives are using. And so a huge investigation followed. And then it turned out that in the 1980s, it seems like South African Special Forces, or people who were trained anyway, did somehow assisted Iran in some way, or perhaps it were members of the South African Special Forces who then went to the British SAS and then went private, and then this knowledge actually came to Iran. Then, of course, when it filtered back, and that's what happened there. But the way they use this thing, they call it a knock-knock, is actually came from Rhodesian Special Air Service. So yeah, if you listen to or you read the book of which we wrote with my mate S.W. Fourie, who is a great demolitions man, and he's got nothing to do with this. Let me just say that. You will see that how he explains the explosives and how it's used. Also, codename Crocodile. They will go into great detail on how these explosives are used in that world. But anyway, so the plot plays over in southern Mozambique by Ling Shai, and also a place called Ngweni Lodge. I don't know if your people has been there. They're right, I think on the Limpopo River or something going into the ocean. Bailene, the old San Martino, it plays a huge role because there was a diving concern there, which wasn't a diving concern, if you understand what I mean. It was actually the heart of counterterrorism in that country and the one surrounding it. And so it plays all there. So with all the GMJ books, if you know these places and you go there, you'll be able to stand there and say, wow, yeah, this is how the book played off. See, there's the beach which we're talking about. There's the Bailene. Here's the mouth going out into the ocean. Yeah, it looks exactly like that. And going out of that lagoon into the Indian Ocean is a major mobber of all things. You really need to know what you do with small boats. It's great fun for the locals. They stand there on the dunes and look at the Valpense. That's the Gautengers, the Gatte province in South Africa, very affluent, in depth. They arrive with their boats and then they try to take on the Indian Ocean and they just flip them. So anyway, to make a long story short, they now looking for these people. They need to find these people, and then they realize that these people might actually be protected by the same as I would say in the South African sense, where you can have Special Forces members working for the secret services of a country, something like the Special Activity Division of of a US, much higher standards. That's a low standard unit, very low standards. Then you might have these people and weapons and things being protected, and therefore they call in help. So they call in South African Special Forces to come and assist them. That was also part of a training scenario. They also call in one of the South African frigates. Why did I do that? I wanted to show to the world that these frigates actually have capacities and capabilities which the world doesn't know about. We do describe these things in the book simply because I want to bring it out in the open, that we do have a navy, because lots of people will roll their eyes. Oh, the ships don't sail anymore. Oh, okay, might be so, but in the books they are sailing. And so we also describe how these people will deploy from the ship with the Oryx. They might even have like a Rooivalk attack helicopter to protect them. We do have an episode on Legacy Conversation about Rooivalk attack helicopter. It's not out yet as I speak here today. Might be out by the time you see here, but I doubt it. We're so far ahead. And also about the experimental version of a helicopter which came before. It's not a well-known attack helicopter, but let me tell you, it's feared, and it's feared for every reason in the book. It's damn good. So I don't want to give away too much further. Obviously, you need to read the book to go through the motions, to understand the smaller details, but this is what the book is about. There's a bunch of rogue scientists. They made these nukes. By being smuggled out, these nukes have to be intercepted, and then they have to be disarmed, and then they have to be getting rid of. And it's a combined operation. Mossad arrives there as well. They're friends, actually family of Angelique. And they have their own scientists there who can look at the things and assist. And they do. And when the question arises, if they find these weapons, what do they actually do with them? So it's a fascinating book. It's really, I thoroughly enjoyed writing it. It's also a book where we first introduced the SAML 100. It's a vehicle. There is actually videos out on it on Legacy. You can have a look at it if you want. I'll put the links in here as well. It's a military vehicle. SAML stands for South African Military. It is old by now. It was built probably in the 1970s, 80s. But these people found one of them. They had it rebuilt. They had it painted burnt orange. Very much playing on the SAS with their pink Land Rovers, which they use in the desert. So good camo. But sadly for them, even though they think it's a mainly burnt orange, it seems that Angelique thinks it's pink. And it's an ongoing joke between the characters for a lot of books, where she talks about, their pink truck and whether they might have some inclinations there, which is, my old sergeant said, very unnatural in the showers. But whatever. And so that's one of the recurring jokes. I also have a motorboat there, one of the old navies, Namakura or something you call it, harbor boats. I got one of these things rebuilt, and they are using it and they're towing it around, and they're so proud of it. And Angelique is just like laughing at them. Well, you know what? There are some plans between Rebecca and myself to actually buy a vehicle like this and to tour Africa a bit while we can still do it, while our health actually allows us to do it. And so it's this long before I met Rebecca now. But I always had this idea of getting an overlanded vehicle. But in fact, in the books and in real life, such vehicles are used. And they are definitely not painted in a military color because you won't get them across the border. You have to paint them in orange or something which can really look like it might be an old military truck, but it's not one anymore. You know what I mean? And what lots of people do is they actually paint a map on the side so that they follow so you can say, okay, I went through these countries, blah, blah, blah. So you try to fit in, you try to be just another crazy white man who's traveling through Africa. That's one of the covers which many people used. If you look at what the former one Recce commander Frans Fourie. In his episode, he talks about one of the covers they used on the Project Ivory was to be like just travelers through Africa. They would join a tour group and they would go through, and that's how they would get to countries where they couldn't get before. So Project Ivory, in my opinion, and I'm not talking out of Frans Fourie's words, please, good friend of mine, wonderful man. So don't say Colonel Fourie has said that the GMJ books are the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. He never said that, he never read them, doesn't even know about them. But in his talk to us at Legacy, he did mention Project Ivory, which then later I think became known as the Egg Breakers, which you find in all the book, because the main character, Foxtrot, is an egg breaker. So is his mate Peter Gilsang in the Ndebele. And these are the people who was helping Angelique. But if you read Codename Crocodile, it is explained in much greater detail what is meant with the assassins and the egg breakers and Angelique's people, the Secret Service, and how they combine with each other. And yes, they exist. Even though you go out and you ask around about them and see how far you get. These things are denied. That's why, that day when Angelique said to me, go and write a fictional novel, she was very clear-sighted. She was actually thinking quite far ahead because she knew it would be the perfect cover. If people then start asking questions, they just shock. They say, man, did you read the James A. novels? Yeah, man, it's fiction, man. Don't you understand now? It's fiction. And if you keep on with your crap, you might die. So don't do it. Don't do it. And that is Codename Angel. I just want to go through all my notes here. I spoke a long time to you, just to be sure that I covered everything. It's a really, really interesting story. I could have spoken a lot more about something which were known as Red Mercury, a project called Red Mercury. It's a COVID code name for white plant at Pelindaba. And there is no such thing as red mercury in nature. The name itself comes from a KGB sting operation in the 1970s and 80s. But they said they had secret and some miracle ingredients to build nuclear weapons, and when they saw who responded, and then they knew what was happening, and they got taken. These guys who responded, mostly the Middle East, they just took millions of them for hard currency, and they never delivered. So there's rumors to say that the South Africans knew this, of course, and they used the same code name for something else, knowing it would refer back to that operation. And then there's, of course, other people who say no, it never existed. But it did exist. On the KGB files, it actually existed. Oh yeah, then this is very interesting, is that it also came out in the book that the Americans under Mr. Carter, Jimmy Carter. Now, I know a lot of you think not much of Jimmy Carter. You think he's an idiot. I don't. Jimmy Carter was actually a submarine officer. They're not idiots. It's the cream of the US Navy, not the fly boys. Oh, you can see my late wife, Melissa, the second late wife. She's rolling her eyes now. It's just a memory in my head. It's not really, not true, When you're dead, you sleep. It's not that she's appearing here and rolling her eyes. I just want you to understand. But Mr. Carter he didn't get the credit that he should have gotten, actually. He was planning on attacking Tehran for the hostage story. He was the one who has actually launched that absolute failure of Operation Eagle Claw, which you can read about in Codename Wrangler. Actually, I have a copy of Codename Wrangler here. But you can read about that failure where it's all about aircraft rescue. A lot of innovative thinking came out of it. They wanted to land C-130 aircraft inside a soccer stadium. Yes, inside. And then take off again with hostages from right outside, inside the stadium inside Tehran. Yeah, amazing, ain't it? And they could have done it. But it seems there was actually a plan. I don't know how serious it was, but he had plans to strike at Pelindaba. And he didn't think of using the CIA or any of them. They are so useless, they wouldn't have gotten through. But with aircraft. And this was built on the same way, the plan. It was the same as what happened a year or two before, where the Israelis with the new F-16s actually attacked the Iraq nuclear plant. But what most of you won't know, sadly so, and I do describe this in many books, this one probably too, is that the Iranian Air Force attacked that plant a few months before with their Phantom II aircraft. So the Israelis were not first. But of course, since the Israelis, the movies came from them, nobody knows about the Iranian Air Force attack there. Nobody knows that the Israeli assistance, intelligence assistance to do that. Yeah, nobody knows about that. And also that the reigning F-14 Tomcat Ace, Fighter Ace, is not an American. No, it's Iranian. Actually dead now, he's deceased, was a brigadier general in the Air Force. He's actually the reigning ace of a F-14. People don't know these things. But it is shocking to me that the Americans could even think that they could launch such a strike, probably from Botswana, and get through. Would they have? I don't know, guys. What do you think? I don't know. I don't think so. I think they would have had serious problems. But it's also so that these Pelindaba and the place where the nuclear weapons and things were being assembled and enrichment and so were not protected really against conventional attack that much. They were more based upon secrecy. So in that way it could have happened, of course, but yeah. I just want to say one last thing here about Pelindaba, where the nuclear weapons, is that there was a leak that we established beyond doubt. There was a leak, and they actually, that's what I heard, got some of the laborers, the black guys, came to just wash it out with hose pipes, with water. And I think those black guys actually died also of thyroid cancer. And I think that's where the water got into laudanum. And that's why the Muslim population there started having thyroid cancer, as well as the misformed babies, things like that. Could never prove it, and after Angelique told me to piss off, I did. So I don't know. But if you research a bit, you will definitely find an article in one of the Afrikaans magazines called the Huisgenoot, which is of course not a source of intelligence at all. It's very bad actually. But there is an article about that incident. And so everything linked together, which is fun. That is why the GMJ books, I really like writing them, because they link together. We take something here, something there, bungo. Put them together. I have a brain who can do that. Anyway, guys, that's the book. I don't have a copy here as far as I know. I might have had a copy at some stage, but I think somebody came to visit and just asked for a copy and I just gave it. The book is available on audio. It's available hardcover, softcover, Kindle, and it's on Amazon. Will leave the links for you here. I really hope you enjoy the book. It's a great book. It's a great read. There's all sorts of things happening also. I didn't even describe to you snipers. Now they actually take one of the Zimbabweans out, and what happens further, and then you have to be tested for HIV and AIDS because you're getting contaminated by the blood. Long story, man, long story. And now they plant bugs at Ngani Lodge. It's probably still there. So anyway, that's the story. I hope you enjoyed it, and God bless until we meet again.